For watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Points of View. We're back again after the break. I've got Liz Webb and Lucy Trimnell joining me, Tom Rogers, for some discussion about the latest news, stories, and analysis in education this week. Plenty to discuss, as always. Liz and Lucy, have you had a good break?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it's been really nice. Thank you. Yeah. How about you,
And
Tom?
I was well throughout all of it.
Really?
And so, yeah, that was an amazing achievement.
That's good. No, I had a good one. And I didn't get ill either. So
That's
pretty
good going.
impressive.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Famous last words.
yeah, touch wood. Anyway, we've got two things to discuss. We're gonna kick off in a minute talking about this story that's appeared in the Times and the Telegraph about children with less severe special needs set to lose support. This is part of the white paper that's going to be published later this month, and it's set to argue that spending on SEND has become unsustainable, and it's set to basically say that only parents with children with severe needs will have the legal right to certain support under plans to try and cut the costs. And then the story sort of goes on to talk about the spending on SEND. So spending for SEND pupils has increased by 2/3 since 2012, 2013. It's set to hit £11.1 billion this year, and it's expected to hit 12.9 billion in 3 years' time. And it also mentions soaring demand for SEND support has been driven by a rise in autism and ADHD diagnosis, as well as speech, language, and communication needs. About 520,000 children with SEN were eligible for taxpayer-funded transport to and from school in the 23-24 tax year. We also have if you look at the story, you can see it. There's a helpful graph which basically shows you the number of students with special educational needs or EHC plans, EHCPs, increasing year on year up to end of 2024. Don't know what the figures are for 25. I'm guessing they haven't been released yet. But basically, it's rising and rising. SEND support and EHCPs. So if this particular story is true, and this was in the Telegraph on the Times, if this particular story is right, what are our thoughts on it? Liz, I'll start with you. Any thoughts?
So if I've read it correctly, because obviously it's not going to reduce the number of students that have these needs, so they have to go somewhere. And so if I've read it correctly and I've understood it correctly, the suggestion is not that people who currently receive support, that's not going to change. So any students that are in special provision, they're not going to have that withdrawn, that will continue. But it seems like what they're suggesting is that no new places will be created, and so there'll be some sort of spectrum and decision being made about who is severe and who is moderate and whatever. And then they will not be offered special places, and they will be catered for within the mainstream system, which I find absolutely baffling, because we already know that the mainstream system is stretched to breaking point and cannot cater for all the needs that we have. The funding presumably isn't going to disappear. It will either, or it will, and it won't be reallocated to schools, in which case mainstream schools are going to be being asked to deal with more with less, which seems to have been the case year on year on year anyway. And so I don't see who this is going to help. Like, I understand that the funding is unsustainable. I get that, but I don't feel that this is the solution. But of course, we do have a massively diluted system anyway for SEND, because there's been such a rise in the number of EHCPs and diagnoses that are emerging, and the demands that are kind of being, or the requests effectively for support that are being made, that we can't keep up with that. So how are we going to keep up with that unless there's an increase in funding? I don't understand where this is going and how it's going to have a positive outcome. That's what worries me.
Yeah, go on, Lucy.
Well, no, I mean, all I was going to say is that I think that some of the issue is, and frustratingly, I looked something up yesterday, but it's on this computer, and I think if I switch to it, I will lose you, so I'm going to have to leave it. But in Wales, I understand that they've already reduced their the number of students who are eligible for or considered to have SEND. And I think that the issue isn't that the numbers of children are increasing, but just that we're more likely to diagnose children with special educational needs when they don't necessarily have them. For me, there's always a concern that once you've diagnosed a child and given them it reduces an expectation almost immediately, because you're saying you'll not be able to do this, you're always going to struggle with this. And I worked with a colleague who always suspected that her daughter was autistic. She was very, very high ability, but lots of her behaviours and traits went along with autism. And she was a teacher, she'd been a teacher for years, but she did not ever get her daughter diagnosed, because she felt that her daughter, considering she was able, it was her social interactions and things, that she needed to learn those without a label, without the sort of, extra, or we come and do this quietly in a room here. And her daughter's now at university and thriving. And I do think that sometimes we are very quick to look at a child and say, well, there must be something wrong, when very often a lot of the things that, like the ADHD, well, a lot of those things could come from other causes, a lot of those traits. And I think that you learn to manage. I think that schools can manage children with ADHD, for example, just as well without the label, because teachers can identify those traits. They can see what's needed. They can see that this child's better sitting here. I just worry that sometimes, as soon as you say, this child has this condition, or this learning need, I just feel as though you then set them on a pathway for costly support, for being withdrawn from the classroom, from the mainstream, for lots of circumstances. And I think that actually we certainly didn't have all of those sort of identified needs in the past, and I'm only talking about sort of 15 or 20 years ago. I'm not talking about in the 80s where everybody was just whipped into shape. What I mean is that I think we need to go back to managing things without labeling young people, because I believe I have ADHD. I believe that I had it all the way through school, and nobody, it wasn't a thing then. And I know that lots of women of my age, and now it's particularly women, are going forward and presenting and getting treatment. And I've looked at it and thought, I've just learned to live with how I am. And I know I'm a last minute person, and I know that my focus is diabolical, and I have to take loads of notes in meetings, otherwise I'm away with the fairies, so you kind of, and actually working in education was the greatest thing for me, because you cannot switch off for a second, and you have to be ready, and there are constant deadlines. And so if I've learnt to manage it, then I just wonder whether we're setting young people up to not learn those skills themselves.
I genuinely believe that most people who work in education are neurodiverse in some way, shape, or form. I think that's why we've ended up in education.
Yes.
I because I think it suits us and the way that our brains think and work, for sure. So I do agree with you, Lucy.
But also because you feel that focus, like I always wanted to be the person in school that I know I could have done with. Do you get what I mean?
Yes,
somebody who
totally.
Understood, somebody who didn't judge, but I was always in trouble, whereas when I was in school teaching, I always gave leeway. I understood why that child hadn't brought their homework in, and I think that I wanted to be that person. That's what drove me into education, because I wanted to do what I thought could be done better. Does that make sense? Terribly
totally.
worded, but Tom?
I think one of the things you said, Lucy, that I sort of think about is this whole idea, and I saw somebody actually writing about this today, and I can't remember who it is, so apologies to them, but they were basically talking about how we've linked, behavior with send and send with behavior, as in, this idea of, that they're send, so obviously, that those behaviors are going to happen, and that's the way it is, sort of thing. I think that can be a real problem for, it's actually insulting in a way to, to students with send to sort of, without even knowing who they are, without getting any sort of take on their personality and what they're like as a person and a student, we immediately sort of say, can't behave.
Yeah.
And that attitude then permeates across the whole system. And if every adult around them, potentially even at home as well, has that sort of take on it, then I think that can be really, sort of detrimental potentially. On the flip side to that, you also mentioned the 80s, and we've had this sort of conversation on here before about the sort of idea that back in the 80s, there was nothing. It was almost like going from one extreme to the other. Like, that was the extreme of nothing, that there is nothing wrong with anybody. I say wrong. There is nothing, there is nothing to, there's nothing to say here other than, get ready for school, get on with it. And that's it. Right. Then I think we sort of moved forward and, I think we moved to a place which was better, which was more healthy, of sort of like, we need to start exploring, differences better. We need to start identifying differences better. We need to start being more aware of individual children and their needs. And I think that happened. However, we're now in a place where, let's just take the sort of, if we were to just look at it from a pure financial point of view, it's unsustainable.
Yeah.
The SEND system in how it is now, we can't carry on with it. Now, there will be some people out there probably saying, yes, we can. We spend all this money on this. We spend all this money. No, I'm sorry. It just is not sustainable. Like, unless you literally were to bankrupt the whole sort of system and everything. If you
because I think as well, that is a slippery slope, isn't it? Because as soon as you do throw more money at the system, more people then seek out. It's just like, oh, right, okay, so if I do this, I can get this. And so it snowballs and it spirals out of control, which is kind of where we are.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, my council are now looking at putting hubs in, so social, emotional, and mental health wellbeing. I think they're for SMEH. I can't remember what it stands for, but basically, they're going to put hubs in schools as much as possible, so that children can go to their mainstream school, but they'll be taught in separate classrooms, and it stops that need for busing children across the county to specialist schools, and so it works on that basis. But always my concern is that, and I'm not being horrible about parents, we all want the very best for our children, we really do. And so when you see that and you think, but my child needs that space, then the demand on that space begins to grow. And then you have, because it can't grow, I mean, they're limited, it's sort of 6 children a classroom or whatever, but if there isn't space, there isn't space. But then that creates animosity and anger and a feeling of, well, nobody cares about my child. So whatever we're doing, doing, it does cause, whatever the solution is, it always causes more problems. And like you say, if you expand the funding, more people feel, well, actually, there's funding there, I think that my child should do with that. And I know you say about the 80s and that nobody had anything. People did have things. I mean, if you were autistic, as in severely autistic, you were in a
Yeah.
special needs school and you weren't within the mainstream whatsoever. So a lot of those children that didn't come into mainstream education, and the rest of us who had what I think they're describing here in this article, those less severe special educational needs, that more tolerance requirement or whatever. And that's where schools went wrong then, was the tolerance. You know, I was smacked and all sorts in school because I was talking or I wasn't concentrating and things like that. That wasn't acceptable. But what was acceptable is that everybody knew what the expectation was. You knew I would sit for 30 minutes in a lesson and do nothing and then scribble down a paragraph because I could see the teacher was coming around, and my life still runs like that now. You know, I still am that person, you know. But you know, I learned to manage because I knew what the expectations were. And I think the problem is that we are looking at a class of 30 kids, sometimes only one or two of those won't have SEND, and we're trying therefore to cater, or we've got to do it like this for these children and this child needs this. And it's not just the cost of it, actually it's the management of it. I mean, you know, the upset if you've sent off to reprographics to get your sheet sent and they say we didn't have pink paper, and suddenly that's a child who can't learn, and then you get overlays and the parents complain, and it's so hard to cater individually, to know off by heart every need that every child in every class has got. It's becoming unmanageable. And so I think that in some ways we do have to look at what is special educational needs and actually redefine them.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting analogy this week, which I think it was really clarifying for me. And somebody, it was on Threads or something like that, had said the problem is that for parents, their child is the main character.
Yes.
And that's true. As a parent, my child is the main character in my existence, but I think they then carry that through and expect the child to be the main character in the classroom as well, which they can't be. A teacher cannot cope with 32 main characters.
Yeah.
It's not possible. It's not sustainable. If you were watching a film with 32 main characters, you'd have absolutely no idea what was going on. You would not be able to keep track of the story. It would be unsustainable. And I thought that's such a powerful analogy that works really, really well, because of course, like, we want to advocate for our children. We do think our children are important, but we have to understand that for a teacher, and for secondary school teachers as well, like if I'm teaching a 6-period day, I'll see 180 children in a day.
Yep.
Like, if all of them are my main characters, if I'm having to give all of them absolutely individualized special treatment, it's just not, it's not and it's not because I don't want to, it's not because of I'm lazy, it's because it's not physically possible to do so. And to remember and hold all those things in your head and think, oh, that person needs that person needs that person needs that, oh, I've got to remember to word things in this way for that person. And it's really, really difficult. And
I think also there's that sort of thing of people not having any concept of how difficult, nigh on impossible it is to be that teacher, to not understand what it's like when you're in a class with 30 students and you have even 5 or 6 or 7 students that you need to consider in every single thing that you do more than the other students, you know, or differently to the other students, and being able to manage the behavior in that classroom whilst
as well.
And the classic example I always think about of this is you know, sort of, I mean, I remember a really challenging class I had. This would have been 10 years ago now, maybe more. And, you know, the start of the lesson was always super important, right? It was really, really important. And, you know, because they're a challenging group, there were 30 in there. So you had to get that right. You had to be on it. You had to be on it. And as a teacher, right or wrong, my only focus, I'd obviously plan the lesson. My focus was the lesson, but my big focus at the start of the lesson was the behavior. My big focus was, how am I going to get this class to function in the way that they need to for the next 60 minutes.
Mhm.
You know, it was about going through that lesson. Now, I remember a few times this happened, maybe once. I can't even remember now. We're going back 10 years. But I do remember that, you know, in that class, and this is by the way, this is not me saying that this student didn't need this, but there was a student in there who needed the different colored, I think 3 different colored, there might have been 2 students in there who had the requirement for 2 or 3 different colored overlays. And it was on me as the teacher to sort that out prior to that lesson going ahead at the photocopier or whatever. It was actually when you've got 8 classes or whatever, that's difficult. And I remember being 5 or 10 minutes into a lesson and then sort of, sir, you forgot the overlays. And suddenly that whole lesson now, my entire focus is on sorting that issue out. So I've then got to try and get another adult, go to the photocopier, sort out the photocopying of the overlays because I can't leave the room. They can't really do anything until I do that. And that's one tiny microcosm of, imagine you had 10 of those in a lesson, not involving colored overlays, but 10
various different things
that you hadn't done or you should have done, that's while you're trying to actually teach content and you're trying to actually deliver to all the students in a way that the lesson actually works. And by the end, you're pulling your hair out because you're going, I can't do this. Now, there will be people who say, well, more funding would sort that out. I think that more funding might help. So, for example, if you had, I think what that report was saying, what the Times and Telegraph articles were saying was that they would have a TA in the classroom working with 5, 6, 7 students and sort of working with those students because TAs have really been stripped out to a certain degree. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think that could potentially help. I think if you had 2 extra adults in a room, it always used to make a really good difference. 2 TAs in a room. Because sometimes I had that. I'd have like 1 TA working with 1 specific student. Then I'd have another TA just sort of working with, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5. They've been assigned to a number of students. That always helped. But fundamentally, we can't move to a system where it's all like one-to-one teaching. Some people think that we can eventually move to a place where you don't have conventional classrooms and everyone's taught one-to-one. Well, there might be the privileged ones who can do that from a homeschool point of view, right? Who have maybe the money or the resource to be able to do that. Or, we may move to a place where the class sizes, the pupil numbers are going to reduce anyway. So we are probably going to end up in the next 10 or 20 years with lower class sizes generally anyway. But, we can't, it's financially impossible.
I don't know if we will. I think they're going to just, I agree. I think they're just going to use it as a money-saving enterprise and they're going to slim down staff. And class sizes will still stay the same, if not get a little bit bigger, and then we'll cope with I've got a huge department that I work in at the moment, but if student numbers reduce, they'll probably let go of 3 or 4 of us, and we'll still have the same class sizes because they'll see
someone's commented on what I've said. I think lesson preparation, don't blame the children that needs the adoption. I didn't blame the students who needed any of the sort of, adapting of resources or planning. Now, it's not something that I would do. But
it can happen. They can run out of their book and everyone you didn't know. And absolutely.
What I'm doing is highlighting the challenge of being a mainstream teacher. And
absolutely.
I started off by saying I don't think some people have any concept of what it is like to be stood in front of a class of 30 and have to actually manage that situation. And if you don't manage it well, you're going to have a problem just in terms of being able to get through the day, because there's going to be the class is just going to be chaos. People think that a teacher can stop and have this like 10-minute sort of one-to-one conversation with a student in the middle of a lesson. Let's pause, everybody, because we need to go and talk to this student for 10 minutes halfway through a GCSE history lesson. It can't happen. When you've got, it can happen maybe if you're I think some people maybe as well have an understanding of maybe what their schooling was like. If they went to a really nice private school where you had 7 students in a class as a child, and that's where they went, and that's their experience of education, then maybe you then look at it and go, well, why can't it be like that everywhere? Well, it can't, because you've got 30 students in the class. So if there's 7, sure, you can, and they're all nice and sort of, getting on, everything's going great. Yes, you can have a 10-minute conversation and everything's great. But if you've got challenging behavior there and it's not working out so well, then you could have a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the behaviour management, we have to take that into account. In that class of 32 students, where you might have 8, 9, 10 who have special needs, because I think, did I read somewhere it's the proportion has risen of children coming into school with special educational needs, and it continues to rise as well. So on top of that, you've got this rising number of students, so you could easily have a third of a class with special educational needs. And whilst that can be tied into behaviour, very often there are kids with no special educational needs who are just being kids and their behaviour needs managing. And then you've got those quiet kids who you're supposed to be able to get to. You are supposed to be able to approach them and see where they're struggling, because they're not going to reach out, they're not going to cause trouble. So you've got all of these different needs that you need to meet beyond the SEND spectrum. Do you see what I mean? And I think that's the problem, that we are trying and expected and demand of ourselves that we meet all of those individual needs in a huge class setting, and it just can't be maintained. And like they said, instead of all this one-to-one, we have a TA that maybe works with a small group of students, and that can work. But also, if you're in a crowded classroom, that means they've all got to sit near each other, and if they don't sit near each other, because some of them can't sit near a window or something, do you get what I mean? And before you know it, you've got another problem. And so we've got to learn to manage these things, and we've got to learn in some ways, and this is the sort of mean thing here, we have got to take the children with things like dyslexia who absolutely need that support, but we need to take the children who have those mild or moderate special educational needs, the things like ADHD, those students, we're going to have to start having expectations of them that they can sit where we tell them to sit, or that they can do the work, that it's not a reason to not behave in the lesson and things. And that's got to come right through from the start. I mean, that has to come through. I remember being in hospital and a lady next to me saying, you wait till my other kid comes in, he's got ADHD, it'll be a nightmare. And so I was, thinking, oh God, here we go. And the child came in and he sat nicely on the bed for the whole time. And when it's time to go home, he went home, and I thought, he hasn't got ADHD. That child can't. I mean, my own children were a little bit older, but they were more of a pain in the neck. Do you get what I mean? And they didn't have ADHD either. So I just think sometimes we're just very quick to say if your child's lively, or if a child struggles to concentrate or struggles to put pen to paper and things, we just immediately say, well, they must have a need and it's got to be met, we need funding for this, and we need them to have a TA, when actually they've just got to learn, that the expectations are there for them as well. Because otherwise we've got so many young people now who are coming out of school and education and not into work because they don't believe that they can work. And so we've got the other end of this coming through.
It's a reason, it's not an excuse. I think that's a phrase that I use all the time, because I'm so sick of it being used like a shield. It's like, oh, I can't do that because like that, and I'm like, I don't agree. Like, I'm not going to lower my expectations of you, because that's not right. I don't want to have low expectations of you. I want to have high expectations of you. I want you to go out into the world and I want you to be incredibly successful. And if I lower these expectations for you at this point, you are going to think that the world is going to owe you something, and it doesn't owe you anything. People are not going to make these concessions for you. And like I've really struggled with this concept of masking. And it's like, well, they're masking. I'm like, we all mask. All of us mask.
Yeah.
We're always masking. That's actually a life skill.
Yes.
That you have to learn to do. We've all got things. There are teachers in schools who have their own lives, who have, well, everybody in every job, not just teachers, who have things going on in their life, who have divorces, bereavements, you know, elderly parents who are, you know, struggling, who are there needing to care for. They are masking. They are coming into the classroom, or they're coming into their place of work, and they're not wearing all their emotions on the outside. They're not going, oh my God, this is happening, I can't do this today. We're masking because you have to. That's, you know, and it's like, oh, well, you know, they're masking in school. Yeah, do you know what? Yeah, it's hard to have to do that, but it is a life skill. We can't crumble under everything, because we will not function. If we crumble under every huge emotion that we feel, and every time we struggle, nobody's going out to work. You know, we're not going to have places that can open. We're not going to have functioning societies, because if we crumble under every single emotion that we feel, every time we find something difficult, that
I used to call it the Peggy Mitchell effect. And I don't know if you remember EastEnders, but she'd be out the back screaming and crying, and then she'd go out through that curtain into the bar, and she'd go, right then, what's everyone having? And it's that, isn't it? You know, that is how we live our lives, isn't it? You know, you literally sort of put your troubles to one side, and the kids come in, you go, hello, how are you today? Come and take your seats, and all of that kind of stuff. And you're absolutely 100% spot on. It is a life skill, and there is, if you haven't got that ability, you are not going to function.
And I understand that when you come home, you lose it. Yes. Because again, we all do that. Like, we absolutely do that. And I don't think that's something to be ashamed of. I think it's something to be proud of, actually, that you have that coping ability. And I'm so concerned that, like, there'll be a pile-on with, like, oh, you're so unsympathetic. I am not unsympathetic. If anybody knows me or works with me, like, I am empathetic to actually
we know that because we know you, but
but these things can be misconstrued, can't they? Like, I really care so much for the children that I work with, but my goodness, we have to cope. We have to learn to cope. And yeah, it's horrible, and yeah, it is gonna hurt sometimes, and it's rubbish. Life is tough. It is tough. But if we shield people from it too much, we're not doing them any favors. Like, a part of our we're constantly criticized that the curriculum doesn't allow students to learn life skills, but socialization is a life skill. Learning to cope is a life skill. Learning how you can help yourself out of difficult situations is a life skill. And if we constantly cushion difficulty, we're not teaching in the right way. We've got to, like Tom, the example that you were using about photocopying things on the different sheets of paper, what we should be doing is we should be encouraging young people to carry their own overlays around with them. If this is your need, you take responsibility for that. Primary level, a little bit different, I think, but certainly at secondary level, you want some independence, here you go, like, this is the need that you have, that you carry that around with you, and when you need it, you use it. And that's fun, but that's helping them, because again, when they go out, and I get it, they're children, they are children, and I totally agree with that, but they're children who are going to be adults.
This is the problem.
We can't, if you go into work in the future and say, oh, you're going to need to print that out on pink for me because I can't read it otherwise, your boss isn't going to go, oh, okay, no problem, I'll go print it in pink for you. They're going to be like, okay, can you maybe make the arrangements yourself to make that a little bit easier for you? Lucy, you were saying you probably have ADHD. I'm fairly certain that I have ADHD as well. I am not expecting my workplace to make any concessions for me in that respect.
Absolutely.
It's just like, I will cope with it. I will manage it. I will do it. And obviously in more severe cases, that's not possible.
Yes, absolutely. And this is the thing, I had a friend whose son had ADHD, and he would do things like sharpen pencils with blisters on his hand, and he would just sharpen and sharpen pencils over and over again, and he'd have huge blisters on his hands and things. And he really did have severe ADHD. There was no questioning that whatsoever. But for most cases, most children, it's manageable. And like we say, you know, the issue is that we have so many young people now, a rising number of young people who are signing on to benefits, you know, saying that they're incapable of work because they have conditions like ADHD and social and emotional health problems, and you won't get better by not going to work, you know, by not being a functioning part of society. And so the work we have to do has to start when they're much younger. And there are many reasons for it. And one of those reasons is because we have this soaring SEND bill, despite the fact that the school roll is falling and set to fall, it's rising by 1.8 billion, the cost of SEND in the next 3 years. I mean, it's just, it is unsustainable. And so therefore, for the cost reasons, but also for the resilience and the ability of people to be able to function as adults, we have to start when they're small, when they're young, and we have to say, you can sit on the carpet, you can sit there for 5 minutes, and if you do, then you can have a star. We've got plenty of things that we can do to help
Lucy,
children.
by saying no, and I personally agree with everything you said there, but when you say no, the response to that would be,
Yes.
but legally, you are now breaking the law. So as much as everything you've just said is, you know, sort of, people might watch this, some of our viewers might watch that and say, yeah, that makes sense or whatever. There'll be others out there who say no, but that is breaking the law.
So I think that's what this government's doing. They're literally looking. I mean, it hasn't said about the law, but what they're doing is looking at the ways that funding is distributed to children so that only the children with the more severe SEND issues to have it. So I presume alongside that would come, I mean, you would like to think, there's no guarantee, unfortunately, with this lot, but you would like to think that everything underpinning that would also be changed to reflect that as well. Because I think whilst we have felt like we are always doing the kind thing and the better thing for children, I think we're starting to see the evidence that it is not helping anybody anywhere.
I think it does come from a kind place as well. I think like the problem is that it's so often presented in this way that teachers don't want to help, they're lazy, all their holidays and everything. Oh, what, your school day finishes at 3 o'clock and you can't be bothered to do that, you know, that sort of attitude. But it's not, it's because we want to, that we're collapsing under the pressure of trying to do it, because we do. I mean, there's very few people who work in this profession who do it because they don't care. Like it runs on care and selflessness, and we want the young people in our classrooms to thrive. But trying to do everything, it's like you're a jack of all trades and master of none. How much are you helping everybody when you're spreading yourself so thin, trying to cater for all the individual needs? It's not through lack of willing, it's just through total lack of time, ability, because the system has become so diluted with the sheer number of diagnoses and like you say, the legal element.
Yeah, and we need to remember that the purpose of school is to learn, and that when they come to Mr. Rogers' class, they're supposed to learn history. And if that lesson is being watered down because of things like, you know, like I said, if a child spilt their water bottle all over their pink book, you've got to get another pink book, and, you know, you've got to leave the classroom or make provision for someone to go and get one, and you can't find one. And it's all of those things that take up time. So we're not saying we don't want to do it, but we're just saying that it can complicate and disrupt lessons and make things difficult, and those are the things that we have to do. But there are some of those things that maybe we don't have to do. Not the colour.
And then I think also you then have that issue of everything you said, and then that issue of people having zero sort of compromise on going, yeah, that probably was a bit difficult, actually. You know what? Like, yeah, actually, I'm going to give you a bit of a pass there, because, you know, it's like, no, everything has to be perfect. Everything has to work perfectly all the time in all these particular ways. You're a service provider, and if you're dropping below our sort of minimum standards of what we tick, 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 if you don't meet those, you haven't met. You know, there's not that human element of trying to understand the situation that professional might be in.
Yeah.
And their feelings, as in feeling overwhelmed, feeling like they're not doing a very good job, trying to meet lots of other targets they have that are nothing to do with that particular child. They might be exam targets, they might be curriculum targets, they might be all this. They've got this whole big job here, and it's like, you know, there's almost that, sometimes I feel there can be that lack of sort of understanding or compromise around the teacher's role and what they're trying to do and who they are and their meaning and their motivation, why they're doing it, them as people. It's like sometimes there's that starting on the default as this guy doesn't care, or because this guy is being a bit strict, he's nasty. Mrs. So-and-so down the corridor, she does this, says this, doesn't, you know, and it's like, no, that we mentioned earlier about acting, that could be part of that teacher's persona. That could be part of how that teacher gets really good results in the classroom. It could be part of how they do their job. It also probably means they're not uncaring, or, you know, not, you know, or they might be, you know, just part of their persona. So it's, I think there's a lot.
I used to work with a really strict deputy head. She was years ago when I first started teaching, and she was little, but she was fierce. She was absolutely brilliant, and the students were terrified of her, and they hated her. And one of the more difficult boys, when he left, he'd kind of come head to head with her several times. And on results day, he said, "I realised what she was doing. I've passed because of her." Like he had this like epiphany of like, oh, hold on a minute, it was tough love. It was tough love.
Like, I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen loads of times, loads and loads of times, more times than I can remember. And sometimes students do respond really well to that over time. I think initially there might be some pushback. Initially, you know, I think that's the problem when people visibly see a pushback. They go, "Oh, back off. Oh, we don't now." Whereas if you just push through, actually in 3 lessons time or something, that student might have settled down into that routine, into those boundaries, into that thing without any need for any other intervention. Literally, it's just a case of being consistent. It's almost like the broken record thing. This is, and over time, 5 lessons in or whatever it is, they settled in, they're doing well, they're enjoying it, and actually they have that level of respect maybe at the end. And some people, obviously that's not every single child, there'll always be exceptions, there'll always be, you know, whatever, but I do think we underestimate sort of the power of routine, the power of, you know, consistent boundaries, the power of just, you know, good teaching. Actually, you know, if you can produce good teaching, every child enjoys that. I'm yet to meet a child who doesn't enjoy it when the teaching is good. And feel engaged. It doesn't matter what their behavior's like, right? If the teaching's good and if the lessons are going well, then they tend to enjoy it. Now, unfortunately, for the lessons to be good, the behavior generally needs to be pretty good. You know, so I think it all ties together into one. Guys, I just want to mention our 2 sponsors on the show this morning. We've got Hachette Learning, who are publishers of professional development books and resources for schools around the world. If you want to find out more, head over to the Hachette Learning website. We really appreciate Hachette Learning for sponsoring all the shows on Teachers Talk Radio. And also the Bet Show, which is coming up in a couple of weeks' time. It's actually on the 21st of January in the Excel Centre in London. It's the largest EdTech show in the world. You can get a free teacher ticket if you head over to the Bet Show website. Just register your details, come along. Teachers Talk Radio have a stand there, so you can meet us all as a team, and it'd be great to say hi at the Bet Show this year, 21st to the 23rd in London. Just want to give a shout out to all the people who've commented on the show so far. We've got Rural Teacher, who's actually in Uganda watching along, so thank you, Rural Teacher. We've got Sunshine Louisa, Mikkel, we've got Ian, and we've got Paul, and we've got Abu Bakr in, I think he might be in, he has told us before and I've forgotten. But anyway, good morning to you as well. But thank you everybody for tuning in. And any final thoughts, Liz or Lucy, on this before we say bye to everybody?
I mean,
well, Just
He's
that
in
we
London.
need to.
He's in
I think we
London.
agree. I think we agree that probably something has to be done about the spiraling cost of SEND, because we can't afford this for much longer. We cannot afford. I think it's 520,000 children being bused around to school. That's being funded by your local councils, your council tax. You know, if we can find a solution to this that means that the money can be spent on the children who most need it, then for me, I think that would be a good solution. That might mean that some of those more moderate conditions don't get the funding.
Yeah,
I
makes sense.
agree.
We've had 250 live viewers this morning, so thanks very much
Wow.
everybody for tuning in, and do watch back as well if you just join in now. We'll make this available as a podcast. If you want to give us a follow and a like on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts really, or interact, do remember to give us a follow. We really appreciate every person who follows along and supports what we do. So we'll be back again for Points of View next Sunday. I'll actually be on tomorrow night. If you're interested in my show, I'm on tomorrow night at 7:30 talking to a couple of school leaders about their recent experiences in the new Ofsted changes and the new Ofsted framework. So that'll be an interesting one. That's tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. So hope to see you there for that. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of the Sunday, and see you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused